In this video, I will be walking through the appropriate steps to create a weighted gradebook in D2L. The gradebook serves as the backbone of your D2L course, so setting up your gradebook before your class begins is a great way to ensure that both you and your students have a clear understanding of the graded assignments required of the class. To open the D2L gradebook, from your course homepage, click the Evaluation link group located in the default course navigation bar, and then select Grades. If this is your first time opening the Grades tool, you'll be directed to the Grades Setup Wizard. Otherwise, you will need to click Setup Wizard in the submenu located at the top of the frame. Completing the Setup Wizard is going to ensure that D2L is displaying and calculating your course's grades as you intend. So let's go ahead and get started creating our weighted gradebook. Click the Start button to begin Step 1 of the Grade Setup Wizard, and it's going to ask you what kind of grading system you prefer. This is where you're going to select your gradebook type, and D2L has 3 gradebook types. In a weighted system, so the system that we're going to use in this video, a student's grade items will be calculated as a percentage of the final grade worth 100%. In a points grading system, each gradebook item has a maximum point value, and then the student's final grade will be calculated by totaling the points achieved and dividing it by the points possible. In a formula system, D2L is going to allow you to create your own custom calculation formula that allows you to set conditions on a gradebook item. So this formula gradebook type is their most advanced grading system. If you select the formula grading system, you will have to maintain this formula that D2L is using to calculate your final grades. For this example, I'm going to click the weighted grading system, and then I'll click Continue to proceed to the next step. Step 2 presents you with 2 options for the final grade released to your students. You can choose to release the calculated final grade or the adjusted final grade. Keep in mind that the student view of your gradebook, your students are only seeing a list of grade items and the points they have earned for each item. D2L doesn't display any summary calculations to your students until you release that information. Of course, releasing the final grade in D2L has no effect on a student's official transcript and banner. You must still enter a final letter grade for your students in gold link. Selecting calculated final grade is going to display the grade that is achieved by users based on their grading formula that you specify, and it cannot be adjusted whatsoever without, of course, editing the individual grade item scores. Selecting adjusted final grade will present the calculated final grade to you, but then give you an opportunity to change or modify that grade before releasing it to your students. I typically suggest selecting this adjusted final grade simply because it gives you as the instructor more flexibility. So if you want to round a student's grade up or apply some bonus points to your student's grade, you have the opportunity to do so. Make your selection on this screen and then click Continue. The third step of the Grade Setup Wizard determines how D2L handles ungraded items. So in D2L, an ungraded item is any item that does not have a grade inputted in it. So an example of an ungraded item is a future assignment that has yet to be completed by the students. Or if the student had failed to upload an electronic submission or failed to complete a quiz attempt at all, that would also be considered an ungraded item. Selecting Drop Ungraded Items will configure D2L to ignore any ungraded or blank grade items when calculating that student's final grade. Selecting Treat Ungraded Items as 0 will configure D2L to count all ungraded items as a 0 toward the student's final grade. Mark the Auto Update checkbox to keep a student's final grade calculated, as well as update any time a student's grade item changes. So this Update Final Grade shows on the instructor view of the gradebook, and it helps you gauge your students' performance in the course. I always recommend checking this option. Make your ungraded item selection and then click Continue. The fourth step of the Gradebook Wizard controls the grading scheme of your course. In D2L, a grading scheme is how D2L presents a student's grade in both the instructor view and the student view. The default scheme here at ETSU is percentage, and keeping this default setting has no effect whatsoever on the grading calculation that you had selected. So for this weighted gradebook, selecting percentage here gives you the option to display a points grade or the grade scheme to your student. In this particular course, I have created 2 additional grading schemes, a letter grade scheme and a letter grade plus minus scheme. Now, if I were to choose letter grade scheme instead of percentage here, my students would see an A instead of a 90% in their gradebook. So the scheme, again, controls how a student's grade is displayed. It has no effect whatsoever on grading calculations. Most often, percentage will work just fine for most gradebooks. So click percentage and then click continue. In step 5, you will set the number of decimal places to be displayed in the grading area. You must select a number between 0 and 5, and the default is 2. But note that selecting a 0 or a 1 will not force D2L to round your grade up or down. It will just simply display either 1 or no decimal places. Enter the number that you prefer and then click continue. In step 6, you will configure the student view of your gradebook. You have 4 choices in this grading details section, and you can mark any or all of these 4 options. Mark the points grade to display the student's numeric grade and the max point value of a grade item to the student. You can mark the weighted grade to show the student the weight achieved for this particular assignment. You can mark the grade scheme symbol to display the scheme symbol associated with the grade item to the student. Marking grade scheme color will display the grade scheme color associated with the grade item to the student. Now, the color can only be displayed if scheme symbol above is also displayed. Enter the number of decimal places to display to students in the decimals displayed text box. You must enter a number between 0 and 5, and the default is 2. So just choose your number. And then in this characters displayed field, you need to select a number between 0 and 50. This number is going to determine how many characters to display for text gradebook items. Now, text gradebook items are used to communicate non-graded text-based items in your gradebook, and the default is 15 characters, but you may want to bump that up to maybe 30 or 50. Marking the final grade calculation option will determine whether or not your students can see how their final grade was calculated. Basically, a calculator icon will display beside of a student's final grade, and when the student clicks on the calculator icon, a window will pop open that lists the grade items involved in the final grading calculation. So if you want to make that available to your students, click the final grade calculation and then click continue. Step 7 is summary information, so you need to verify that all of the information displayed on your screen reflects the settings that you intended. If you see any errors or discrepancies, now is the time to make changes. So if you need to make any changes, use this Go Back button to return to the appropriate step, make the changes, and then continue on throughout the Gradebook wizard. If all of the information displayed on this screen is correct, click Finish, and you're now ready to begin creating gradebook items and categories in your gradebook.